Hello. We're going to talk about what it actually means to have a problem with alcohol. This can be a pretty touchy topic for some people. Is it wrong to enjoy alcohol? If someone is performing well at work and sticks to a safe plan when they go out, does it really matter how much they drink? Can I have more than 3 drinks without the Air Force assuming I'm a crippling alcoholic? The purpose of this video is to explore some of these questions and break down some of the underlying assumptions about what it means to have a problem. We run into some pretty big problems when we try to identify what responsible drinking should look like on paper versus how drinking actually plays out in the wild. If you've ever been to basic military training, first-term airman's course, newcomer's orientation, or even just a commander's call, you've probably gotten some pretty inconsistent impressions on what constitutes a drinking problem. One thing we can probably all agree on is that problem is a loaded term. It's easy to assign to the people around us, but it's much harder to qualify or accept when we evaluate ourselves. We've all met someone else who clearly has a problem, and it can be pretty apparent that they need help. When we evaluate ourselves, though, we can often seek the most extreme examples possible to qualify what counts as an alcoholic, and as long as we aren't that bad, we're good to go. This type of thinking is one form of a fallacy called moving the goalposts. We'll talk more about that along with other fallacies we trap ourselves into later on in the video. As humans, we love to summarize one another. This is especially true with first impressions. As soon as we know something about a person, we assign them into categories, and those categories can come with a number of attributes that we may or may not actually have evidence for. We already know most of the classic examples. All skateboarders are posers. All Nickelback fans are highbrow music aficionados. Pit bulls are aggressive, referees are blind. So what comes to mind when you think about alcoholics? Let's take whatever picture we have in our head when we think about this question and see how it applies to different case examples. There are no right or wrong answers here, but this can be a good opportunity to test our own biases and perhaps adjust our individual definitions of what it means to have a drinking problem. Let's meet Bob Bojangles. Bob Bojangles is a staff sergeant and is getting pretty tired of people constantly criticizing his drinking. Let's pretend Sergeant Bojangles doesn't drink very often at all, but last week he got a DUI from a random traffic stop. This is unfortunate timing because he also attempted to start a fight with his first sergeant while drinking at Chili's yesterday after feeling singled out at a commander's call. Does Sergeant Bojangles have a drinking problem? What if instead he drinks and drives all the time, but has never been caught? What about our relationships? Let's pretend the DUIs never happened. Sergeant Bojangles is an all-star at work. He's never been late a single day, and he always drinks responsibly during any social event. However, he really struggles to be assertive and express his feelings. He hates confrontation and finds it much easier to bring up problems in his relationship after he's had a few drinks. Controlling emotions is unfortunately also difficult while drinking, and his initial attempts to be fair and diplomatic almost always end up escalating into a fight. Despite his intentions, things usually wind up even worse than they were before. This has happened regularly ever since coming to Korea. Would you consider him to have a drinking problem? Here in Korea, weekends can be pretty jam-packed with celebrations and nights on the town. It's almost always somebody's going-away celebration, promotion release, or birthday. Sometimes people promise themselves they won't overdo it, but whenever they go out, they can't refuse drinks and end up feeling miserable. Naturally, we would encourage that person to control their drinking, but would we say that they have a drinking problem? When someone's hungover from a long night of partying, it can be difficult to wake up and go to church or engage in hobbies. Eventually, they just stop going altogether. As you can see, none of these situations have clear-cut answers to them. Even when evaluating someone like Sergeant Bojangles, a stick figure about whom we could care less, there's room to argue either way. So what does that mean when we evaluate ourselves? When we evaluate ourselves, we're going to process that information with much more leniency, bias, and emotion. Nobody wants to be an alcoholic, and our brains will go at great lengths to convincingly avoid that conclusion. There are many examples of how people use mental gymnastics to arrive at a desired conclusion, but today we're only going to talk about 2: binary thinking and, as mentioned before, moving the goalposts. Binary thinking is basically when we disregard nuances or gray areas and oversimplify things into 2 possible outcomes: Perfectionists don't believe in pretty good or mostly good. It's either perfect or it sucks. In the military, it's easy to feel like we're either excellent or we suck. People are good or evil, healthy or unhealthy, all or nothing. There is no in between and there are no gray areas. Moving the goalpost is when we continually increase our standards of proof as to what constitutes a problem. As long as the situation isn't as bad as it could be, nothing is wrong at all. If things do get that bad, then we continue to raise the bar to keep ourselves from meeting it. When used together, we can safely feel like there is no problem at all, and we know what it would look like if there was. Again, our brains are very powerful. We all have bias, and everyone is susceptible to defensive thinking. This is especially true when someone is accused of having a problem. People can use reason to arrive at just about any conclusion they desire, and they will usually arrive at the desired conclusion. Let's see some of those defensive mechanisms in action. Sergeant Bojangles, you can't just ride your scooter extra carefully after drinking and expect this isn't going to catch up to you. You could really hurt someone.
I'll be fine. I know when I'm good to ride. I've never even gotten into an accident. It's not like I'm swerving all over the road. That .03 limit is stupid anyways. Honestly, I think I ride more carefully with a nice buzz.
Every argument you've had with your spouse while drinking ends up escalating into a huge fight.
Well, she needs to stop bringing up concerns when I'm drinking. You would think she would have figured out by now. She has a real problem with picking her battles.
Weren't we going to go hiking this morning?
Sorry, man. I was too hungover. I was getting ready to go home last night, but I ran into some old friends and stayed out drinking. This thing keeps happening. Really bad luck. Sorry, man. Let's try again next weekend, if there isn't a party.
Clearly, there are issues going on, and drinking is the common factor. Sergeant Bojangles doesn't acknowledge this as a problem, however. To him, these are a series of unrelated incidents, and so there isn't any real reason to go to ADAPT. So, confronting Sergeant Bojangles with having a problem isn't getting us anywhere, and his avoidance of having a problem is preventing him from taking steps to better himself. When left unaddressed, where does this mindset lead? The good news is there are avenues to help Sergeant Bojangles intervene with himself before things get worse. What if, instead of basing everything on whether or not he academically qualifies as an alcoholic, he were to turn his attention to things in his life happening now that are truly important? There are a few things that are certain. He has an important role to play, and his career is important. He values his marriage more than he values drinking, and dealing with emotions is hard enough as it is without alcohol. His health, well-being, and ultimately his true potential are all being compromised, and something has to change. He knows that much is true. If you're active duty, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have access to evidence-based resources to evaluate where drinking fits into your life based on your values and make changes before it's too late. Many people get stuck on "I don't have a problem." They allow things to progress and ultimately find themselves in ADAPT far too late in the game. Don't move the goalpost. You don't have to wait until things get worse before addressing concerns. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your career, relationships, and well-being is to be proactive and engage early. Whether you're fixing a problem, addressing concerns, or simply working to better yourself, all of these resources are available to you right now. Please consider reaching out and either coming in or calling the ADAPT clinic, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have. Welcome to Korea. Please drink responsibly and make the most of your time here.